All right, welcome back to Alt-Centrism Central, and today we have very thing for you. We have a debate on the topic of the Great Replacement. As always, Bruce, here with my co-host Joe.
Hello, that's me. We also have
As well.
this is a collaboration project that we're doing with Omen's channel.
Hello, I am from Omens, from the YouTube channel The Omens, coming to debate the Great Replacement.
And as well, we have Mike. Mike, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, good evening. My name's Mike. Looking forward to the debate. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, and I think we'll begin by kicking it off. So for the debate on the Great Replacement, Omen, you were on the side of the Great Replacement not actually exists. Is that correct?
Yes.
And Mike, you are debating that it does exist.
That's correct.
All right, then I think we can start off with an introductory statement, kind of preface of what is the Great Replacement according to you, and why you think it exists or doesn't exist. Which one of you wants to go first?
I don't mind having Mike go first,
Yeah.
or Joe.
I'll go first real quick because my position is just pretty simple. Quite simply, I do think that it exists, but I don't think it's necessarily intentional. I just think that the rate of immigration that Europe is currently experiencing is affecting the demographics. That's all.
Okay, well, obviously, I disagree with that because I think that the immigration is due to a reason, and the reason is obviously often spouted as war, displacement, things like this. But these people are moving through countries where it's quite easy for them to claim asylum, and they're not. They're spreading out evenly, and organisations like the EU are trying their best to manage it and put people where they need to be. But on the same token, when you look further back into this, there are actual documents which state exactly what is going on now, and that's the position I'm going to be arguing from, or debating from, rather.
All right.
Sorry. Go ahead, Ted.
I'm going to segue to you.
I think it's construed with certain mathematics and comparing net accumulation to total accumulation. I think it construes certain things like net migration into certain European countries and declining population growth as a national thing rather than a global phenomena. I think it's used to be called such as things like the Calgary Plan that originated from, I believe.
That's correct.
And it used to be called something called the White Genocide as a previous thing, and it has now been called the Great Replacement.
That's correct. I mean,
my position.
with their two separate descriptions of it. I mean, a lot of people would like to say it's the Great Replacement, but really, I mean, the white genocide term comes from an evolution on that, from where the UN's guidelines and their sort of description of what a genocide is describes what is actually happening here, or in my opinion, of course. Now, using the UN's description of what a genocide is, that was then coined to make it sound obviously more serious, and I think that was the general evolution of the term, but I use both terms.
The Great Replacement and White Genocide.
And White Genocide, yes. Yeah.
And the Calgary Plan is the origin of it.
The Kalergi Plan is
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, I may be saying it wrong. It's a German name, but the Kalergi Plan is I mean, to give a bit of background, Richard Coudenhove Kalergi, he was an Austrian, half Japanese diplomat in the 1920s, very, very heavily involved in things like the Pan-European movement, which aimed to unite Europe without any borders. And he had a theory, I mean, and he does talk about it in the, Practical Idealism, I believe, one of his books. He talks about the warlike nature of European nations. And he says that in order to formulate one nation out of us, the borders need to be dissolved, and the only way to do that is to break the people's spirit and take their I'm sort of paraphrasing here, but to take their identity or their association with the land away, and the only way to do that is through interbreeding. And I mean, this is set out in a book from 1926. This man then went on to be one of the founding fathers of the EU, not in its current form, but in its early days. He's even got an award. I mean, it's in his honour, which is the Charlemagne Award, which pretty much it's given out every year to people who are seen to be working towards European unity. And I mean, the people, I'll read you out the list of names that are on it later on, but the names on it and their policies that they've put forward, and their sort of, a lot of them seem to be open door immigration types, and they've all won this award for furthering what's known as his plan. I mean, it's over a series of books, but I mean, there's no English translation of these books either. I mean, you have to rely on the translation from German sources because it's written in Austrian.
So, can I interject here for just a moment?
Of course.
It is a little bit off topic, but I disagree with his Mr. What was his name again? This diplomat's name? Kalergi. I wasn't sure if the plan was named after him or if he just coined the term. Anyways, Mr. Kalergi, I disagree with his notion that the only way to create a unified European state is to dismantle people's national identities and take away their nationalist pride. If you look at the United States, for example, instead of taking away their pride for, say, king and country, or for the states or colonies that they lived in, you can instead build a common pride or a patriotism for their country. I really don't think that it's necessary to break people down to build something up. And yes, the United States did have problems with people being more patriotic towards their state, or states' rights versus federal authority, things like that. But in the end, they were able to successfully form a country with its own national identity, and with more or less open borders. So yeah, I just disagree with that notion.
Yeah, of course, and to be honest with you, I'm not going to fight against it because I disagree with everything that he's ever written. He's the enemy to me. So I mean, I'm just going to read you a little excerpt of his book, though. This is from the Practical Idealism. The man of the distant future will be a hybrid. Today's races and castes will fall victim to the overcoming of space, time, and prejudice. The Eurasian Negroid hybrid race, similar to ancient Egyptian, will replace the diversity of peoples with a variety of personalities. For according to hereditary laws, the diversity of the ancestors increases diversity, and the uniformity of the ancestors, the uniformity of the offspring. In breeding families, one child resembles the other, for all represent the one family type. In mixed bodies families, the children are more different from each other. Each represents a new variation of the diverging parent or pre-parental element. And I mean, that gives a little insight into what is effectively eugenics, and which is what he's proposing. He's proposing a watering down of the family unit as well, which is something that we've seen throughout Europe. I mean, more so in England, which I know the best out of all of these countries, but I mean, and the social problems that then it creates. I mean, we can go on and on into sort of tangents and whatnot. I don't really want to sort of hold the pedal stall for too long. So if anyone else wants to jump in, I mean, but this is what I'm sort of arguing from. This is a plan to eradicate or to water down European people.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Go next.
I personally would say, when it comes to the net migration of being replaced, a replacement, or what would be known as a genocide, by the definition would be if it's a deliberate attack on certain people. So what I'd like to ask is, who is deliberately trying to replace the native white populations of Europe and USA?
Well, I mean, the list of the people that have been awarded the Charlemagne Prize for one. I mean, the thing is, these things are not going to be policy. Nobody would ever get voted in on a policy that mentions this, because it's very, very hard so it's very, very hard for me to sort of point you in a direction where I can say this person says this. But when you look at it on the whole and you start looking at the individuals and what they and the policies that they bring in, I mean, look at Tony Blair. I mean, before him, and he's a holder of the Charlemagne Award. Before Tony Blair, we was taking in a net migration of around 40 to 50,000 per annum. After him, we was taking on 500,000, and I mean, these ever since then we've never dropped below those numbers. It's a constant march, and it's ridiculous to consider that we're bringing in 500,000 people each year. We are a finite country with finite resources, and I disagree. I refuse to sort of believe that this is down to stupidity. I mean, our politicians are stupid, but they're not completely stupid. They know that we are a finite country with finite resources.
Okay. I guess for the audience here and for everyone else, I think we'll see if we can go through the statistics of what we believe the current net migration to, say, the UK specifically, for example, is.
Okay. Yeah.
So, according to 2018, the EU citizens from the 2015 era and from the non-EU from the 2015 era, when the big wave was happening at this time, the EU citizens did decline. From 18, it went to about 50,000, I think, net migration.
Yeah.
And when for the non-EU, I believe it wasn't 500,000, it was 250,000. But that is perpetuated to possibly increase under the Tony Blair policy.
Yeah.
Which would eventually make it to 500,000 if it were to keep at the same level.
So what is that? Is that's 2018? Because I mean,
2018, not 20. Yeah,
that's sorry, because I've got 2019 figures in front of me. Sorry, and and the actual deficit there. So the net was 212,000. Sorry. So yeah, you are right. I'd read the total. So we had 600. Like this is not 2019. So 609,000 migrate here. 397 left, which leaves you with 212,000. But the point of another factor which isn't covered on those statistics is the people that are leaving. I mean, a lot of them are your British people emigrating to Australia, Canada, places like that. They are the demographic that is being replaced. I can't say that with any certainty because it's not recorded, but I know that from experience or from what I've seen. I know so many people that have left the country because of this, and it may only be my region that I'm living in, and I mean, Omen, you'll probably have a different perspective from where you are in the UK, but I mean, from where I am, I can see that people are scrambling to move away from the ever-encroaching tide of migration.
Okay, I'll say this. I don't believe what is currently happening is a replacement. I believe what has been happening is a demographic change. Is it because of stupidity? Possibly. I do think there's a bit of malice behind it, essentially trying to be a progressive ideologue. Tony Blair's policy was pretty close, or pretty much the same as an open border policy to some. It's close to it, but it's not quite, I would say. That was a very bad move, and it has caused quite a lot of problems. It has caused some benefits, such as like GDP increases, but that's what generally happens to any immigration change. If immigration increases, GDP and the economy does well, but household income and inflation generally gets worse for the majority of other people. And like you could say the wages are also damaged eventually as well if it gets too high.
Of course.
That's back and forth of what does happen during immigration. I guess another fact we could also add in 2019 statistics is it doesn't account for illegal immigration as well.
Of course, yeah.
I don't believe it is 1 million. I've heard that statistic go around. I do not certainly believe it's 1 million. It could go into the tens of thousands. That would be more likely, I would say. So that could go into current number 250 of the non-EU citizens to maybe being about 290,000 non-EU if it was non-EU only. However, this demographic change is happening in other places of the world too, such as United Emirates of Arabia, or the Arab United Emirates. Sorry, they are also going through a similar change. So is Burma. There are certain connotations of Rohingya Muslims going into Burma and replacing that population. Though the Rohingya Muslims are staying stable about 4%. For United Emirates, it's kind of like an African population going into, and it's people arguing this is replacing the Arab population. And these are things which are total debates of deficits and declines in population. But this isn't a European or US phenomena. There is like birth rates declining in like every country in the world. Even like Muslim population growths are declining around the world, and this is a phenomena of it globally. The birth rates are declining. Now, changing that with immigrants, yes, sure, that could help keep a population stable, but projected growths are still going to be smaller. The reason I don't believe this is a replacement per se is the difference between net migration and accumulative migration. The reason I disagree with the replacement theory is because if you have 50,000 whites and maybe 10,000 non-whites in a country, if you go in 10 years and it's still about 50,000 whites, maybe 60,000 whites actually, we'll say 60,000 whites, but then it becomes 20,000 non-EU. They've both increased by about 10k. The cumulative income is still different. So you'll maybe get an increased percentage of the non-whites, but the whites will still round about be the same. And I think that would be a debunking of, when it comes into statistics suggesting that the white population is going to be a minority by 2050, 2060, 2070. And the suggestion is going to be the minority overall. But what it doesn't take into account is that it will still be the majority demographic. It's just that the percentile of the accumulative races are different.
Okay, so can I jump in here real quick, talking about the numbers? Did we say that the UK is getting an average high of about 500,000 immigrants per year? Or is that just something that I read?
Non-EU, yeah. And British, if you want to count the ones coming back. But yeah.
Okay, so if we are going with that number, keeping with that current number until, say, 2050, that would be 30 years. So after 30 years, you'd get 15 million immigrants, hypothetically. But that's assuming, of course, that there are enough immigrants to come from, say, for example, these Middle Eastern countries with the refugee crisis. Even if there are enough people who want to move out of those regions and go to Great Britain, 15 million compared to the about 50 million white British people. I was looking at demographics. I couldn't find anything past 2013 or 2011, but still they make up, white British people make up about 80% of the population, give or take. 15 million versus 50 million. White people are still going to be a majority by 2050, going by the immigration statistics. But then you'd also have to take into account birth rate and people leaving the country too. But just going by immigration alone, it doesn't look like they. I mean, sure, the percentages will change, but it doesn't look like white people are going to be a minority by that time.
You do have to take into consideration the birth rates, and I mean, currently in the UK we have a birth rate of 1.7 children per woman. This is the UK on a whole, really. In France, they have one of 1.3. I mean, traditionally or classically, civilizations never returned from being this low, and it's proved time and time again. And the trouble is that the people that are coming in, and I do watch the demographics quite closely. I mean, an African woman, hers is about 6. You know, I mean, so for every 1.5 children we're having, an African woman's going to have 6. So if you're talking about 15 million African women against 50 million 50 million British women, and every British woman's having under 2 children, and every 15 million African women is having 1.7 on average. I mean, that's when it does start to become a problem. And it's I mean, you've got to understand the mentality of, and this isn't a generalisation, but of migrant populations in countries. I mean, we see it ourselves with British in Spain. They stick together. We see it with migrant populations in London. They tend to gravitate towards each other. They tend to vote the same way. They tend to send their kids to the same school. They form sub-communities, or not sub-communities, but a community within a community. And integration's never pushed. And the number would be a problem even with integration, because it would be a watering down of the population as a whole. But there is no way that a country that struggled to feed 50 million people during the Second World War on rations can sustain 70 or 80 million people. This is another issue. And these are the problems. I mean, on a geopolitical perspective, I mean, if something does go wrong in Europe, which it could do at any moment, we must be mad to have increased our population by that much for some cheap economic gain. And really, I mean, I love my country and I love my people. I'm not generalising against any of these people, but I just want to feel secure in my own land, and I want somewhere for my children to grow old in this land. And that is the driving force behind this. And I know, sorry, I'm babbling on, and I'm going to let somebody else have the floor.
Joel, do you want to speak? I would like to interject with something. With anything you would like to say?
The only thing I really want to say is I would like to talk about Germany's immigration problem at some point, because it is much more severe than the UK's, but you can go ahead with what you want to say.
Michael, this will be a question I'll ask towards you.
Yeah.
When you mentioned earlier the average birth rate for an African woman is 6 per woman.
Yeah. Was I wrong?
Sorry?
Was I wrong? Sorry, have you checked that?
No, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, are you talking about an African immigrant who has just came to the country? Or are you talking about a woman who has maybe African parents, or grandfather was African? Are we talking about an African immigrant or parents?
It'll be the population. It'll be an African woman. It won't be somebody of descent, because they're considered British after that.
Okay.
So what you're getting at is it exponential? Does the next generation then have that many children again? Is that what you're asking?
Not yet, but though
Okay.
I'm about to mention that. You're quite nifty, quite smart.
Okay. Sorry.
One of the reasons why I do think there's an immigration problem. Sorry?
Yeah. Sorry, I am just going to correct myself as well. It's not all. I've been selective with my figures there. So it's not. It's 6 in some of the highest nations. So this is the African woman's birth rate. So it's 6 and 6.2 in some of the higher nations, but it does drop down to like 4.9, 5.5. So it's between 4.9 and 6.65, just for clarity.
Okay. Thank you for that, Michael. I'll say this. We'll say these migrant immigrants come from generally poor backgrounds. We would agree?
In most cases.
Most cases, generally. Would we agree that poorer people in Britain, white as well, like native population, generally have more kids than a richer population, like the upper class?
I would have thought so, yeah, because of education and higher and further education and things like that. I think traditionally, yes, you're correct.
One of the reasons why I do agree there is a immigration problem in Britain, I definitely think that. I do agree that there has been a big problem with what obviously Tony Blair policy and what EU was doing when it came to the refugee crisis. I think it was very mishandled, and I do think there's an immigration problem in Britain. In saying that, I would still like immigration to be easier in Britain, though I would like illegal immigration to be tackled exponentially. And the reason I'm going to bring up birth rates of the African woman is generally what you find. This has happened historically for China and the Irish and the Italians who went to America, and the same Irish came over to Britain in like the 1900s. Generally, migrant population growth is high because generally they also are poorer backgrounds and they're generally lower educated. And migrants tend to have more children, than the native population. this does die around the third generation, because then the cultural norms of the majority country gets into play around about the third generation. So only if projected outcomes of the current non-EU, say Muslim, Pakistani I assume when you talk about non-EU population growth, we're mainly talking about Pakistan and Africa.
Mainly, yes. Yeah.
Mainly.
Well, the Middle East and Africa, yes.
Middle East and Africa.
Yeah.
Those projected outcomes of becoming the minority, in some cases of that articles would say, are only if the population growth stays the same. But historically, this usually dies down, and it kind of gets to around about the same as the native population after the cultural norms play a part. And that's why I disagree with the theory.
But that's if immigration was to stop altogether. Like, so, say for instance, I can't remember who it was a moment ago who brought up that there was 15 million. Who was that? Was that you or Joe or you, Ted? Who brought up 15 million migrants before 2050? Was it Joe? Sorry, Joe. Well, if each one of those had a replacement level, a birth rate level of 6, that would equal 90 million children. You know, and I mean, that is with current trends up until 2050, taking into consideration their current birth rates. And I mean, that to me is I mean, how do you expect our hospitals and our agriculture and our infrastructure like roads, trains, and even our schools and that? How do you, like, we don't? There's no logical way that we can explain what's going on as being a good thing for British people or British children or future generations. I mean, I know they use the argument of, we stripped your pension pots, we need younger people to work. Well, you know, like, it's not my fault that you stripped it, and I'd rather not be replaced in my own country demographically, whether it be purposeful or not, you know, because somebody made a financial error.
I do agree with you. I do think the mass migration has been a big issue, and it's hurt people's wages, it's hurt people's how much rent they have to pay, and it's hurt, I guess I would say, for lots of people like yourself, it's been a scary cultural change for many people, and I can understand that. And also, I don't have the same cultural difference as an Englishman would. I live up north in Scotland. We do not have the same population demographic change that other cities would see, such as Birmingham in London. And I can understand why someone would be annoyed at that. Like, I've spoken to people from the United Emirates, and they have been scared of the African population as well. And I've spoken to people in Lebanon. Lebanon right now is going through a similar crisis when it comes to the Syrian refugees. Lebanon is also going through lower wages, higher rents, because they're afraid of the Syrian population invading into Lebanon, because it's a big increase, such as what we have in Britain. But what Joe said earlier is what I agree with. It's not a replacement, it's more of an addition to the cumulative income, a cumulative population of the migrants. And this is a problem, as it is in very high numbers, but I don't see that as a deliberate attack on the native population. Joe, would you like to speak about Germany, or Michael, would you like to finish off something?
No, go ahead, Joe. I mean, yeah, obviously I do disagree with that, but I'm not going to interject. Go on, for the interest of flow.
Speak on it later.
Of
probably
course.
We'll touch on it with Joe.
Okay, so in 2015, I just read that Germany received about 900,000 migrants. If we go off of that rate, the native white German ethnic population is about 65 million. So if you get 900,000 people a year, it'll be about 70 years until the foreign population is same as the native population. But even before you get to that point, what you're going to have are cultural clashes. And you can already see it happening now. If you look at Germany now, women are buying self-defense weapons, I guess you could say, in record numbers, because guns are illegal in Germany. These cultural clashes that are already happening right now are going to get worse and worse. And even if you take birth rate into consideration and say you chop that number in half and you say 35 years until the populations are about equal, even if you take that into account, you're going to see some major cultural clashes, I think. And not to say that cultures can't eventually be compatible or people can't understand each other, but at the moment, this this drastic increase in a culture that people do not have experience with, that's creating a lot of problems right now. So I think for Germany, the situation is a lot more severe because not only are they facing potentially economic problems, but they're facing an increase in violence and cultural incompatibility.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to jump in there. Was you finished? Sorry.
Yeah, that was it pretty much.
Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, I do agree that Germany has got it a lot worse, but we're seeing the beginnings of it. We was a few years later to this this development which has happened. But Germany, let's remember, I mean, I feel sorry for German people living in Germany because of what's going on. But, I mean, you had someone like Angela Merkel who just opened the borders to everyone else while she was in a free movement area with the rest of Europe. I mean, that to me is a crime, you know. And I'm just going to say quickly, she won the Charlemagne Award as well. The award that's honoured to clergy. So, I mean, when you look at these people and these people who are behind these mass movements of migrants, all of them have won this award. And I mean, I can't help but notice who is involved in this, and they're all being awarded and pats on the back by each other for increasing this. And I mean, I refuse to think that this is just because somebody is too stupid or we're all too polite to say anything. So, I just think for this not to be by design, I refuse to believe that level of stupidity exists.
About that, just real quick, I think it's often seen, especially from people who believe in this, that their intentions are sinister, the people who are orchestrating this. But I think it's also important to remember that a lot of people also see this as a humanitarian crisis. And a lot of people see it as their responsibility to help these migrants because Europe and the allied nations played a large role in destabilizing the area and creating the problems there that exist today. So I don't really think it's fair to say that there's something sinister there, especially when we haven't sat down with these people one-on-one and talked to them about what their intentions are. For all we know, they could be trying to do something to help people.
Then why has she won an award written by the same man who wrote the book to which I read you the excerpt earlier? You know, I mean, that to me is I mean, we're human, we notice patterns. And when you notice that these people are all mixing in the same circles, they're all speaking the same language, they're all following the same code, and their plan that they're following and the awards that they've been awarded are in the man's honour that has written about watering down the European race in order to be able to effectively control it. I mean, this was the birth of globalism, for God's sake. You know, it's about creating units. I mean, I think he spoke about dividing the world up into 4 sections, and one of them was Russia, Eurasia, and America. You know, I mean, if that doesn't sound like George Orwell, I don't know what does. I mean, it's exactly the same. It's a dystopian nightmare.
About the awards, have you ever won an award that you perhaps weren't expecting?
I've never won anything.
Okay. So I just want to touch on that real quick. So when I made Eagle Scout, of course I got recognition from, National Boy Scouts of America. That much was expected. But some of the things I didn't expect were, say, recognitions from submarine veterans and the New York State Assembly. Those were awards that I didn't expect. And, so to say that people are in line with some certain ideology or agenda because they received an award, I'm not sure I quite buy into that. I mean, it's certainly possible, but I don't think it's guaranteed because For example, I've never really why was I recognized by the submarine vets? I've never really done much for veterans. I mean, ideologically, I mean, not sure. I support them. I think they should have benefits and things like that. But what I did, my Eagle Scout project didn't. I don't think necessarily warranted recognition from them. So I guess what my point is that awards aren't necessarily indicators of ideology.
Could I explain maybe why that could be, like, for the awards?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Could it possibly be that these politicians who, how do I pronounce this award? Sorry, the
Clergy. On the Charlemagne.
The Charlemagne. Could this be that because the politicians are just clued up with each other, such as like people with like Jeffrey Epstein and like Hillary and stuff, like clued up to get together? Could it just be that these people are just friends and such, like the global awards, the global globes? Like,
they're just buddies, and they want to feed their egos.
I do have a bit. I won't make this excuse ever again. I'm going to make this now. I've got a bit of speech impediment. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's okay. I'm stuttering all over the place.
You're doing well. You're doing well.
But
could it be that they are friends, and that could be why they just want to give each other a gold star? I like you, and you agree with me.
Then why is it in his honour? And this is why I ask it. And why is he the founder of the pan-European movement? Why is the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, look at what she's up, Guy Verhofstadt, they're asking for a unified Europe with a unified army. They are talking about this now in the European courts. And I mean, I know I can't put my finger on something and say, look, this is where this person has said that, but you start noticing, judge a man by the company he keeps, and that's all I'm saying with this. It's all connected.
Excuse me, gentlemen. Can I say something real quick? I have to go, so I would like to make some closing statements real quick, and then you guys can keep discussing. Because I think there's a lot more that you guys have to say, but unfortunately I have to go. So is that all right if I make some closing statements real quick?
Of course.
That's fine, yeah.
Okay, so on the topic of this great replacement, this supposed white genocide. First of all, I kind of disagree with the term genocide. I don't think the UN is really the authority on what genocide means. A genocide, I think, is a purposeful attack on a group of people. So replacing people demographically, I don't really see that in any context as really a genocide. And you're welcome to disagree with me on that if you want. But
yeah,
furthermore, these demographic changes, in the short term, they are not going to be much of a problem beyond cultural friction, I think. In the long term, we might start seeing some overpopulation problems. And not to say that globally overpopulation is a problem, because I personally don't believe in that, but regionally overpopulation is probably going to become a problem. But in the short term, I think the short term is the biggest risk factor here, is you're taking people from these destabilized and oftentimes radicalized areas, and you're putting them with people who have no experience with them, and they have no experience with each other, really. So this cultural clash is really going to be the biggest problem, I think, at least in the short term. And I don't think that I don't think it's an unsolvable problem per se, but I think it's one that we need to be very aware of and very careful of going forward, so that we can address it properly, so that it doesn't get out of hand. So I guess in summary, the Great Replacement, is it happening? Yeah, kinda. I don't agree with the 10 years thing. I think that's kind of blown out of proportion. It's going to happen slower than what a lot of people are saying, but it is kind of happening, just looking at the numbers. But is it intentional? That's that's where it gets harder to say, because the conspiratorial side of me wants to say yes to that, just because when you look at people like Prince Andrew and Epstein and Bill Clinton, all these people who are connected and they know each other and they're buddies. I really want to say that, yeah, they're just screwing us over and they're having a good laugh about it. But it's important to remember to take a step back and really take your time to have solid evidence about those kinds of things. And I guess that's about all I have to say. It's really been a pleasure talking about this with you guys, and if you guys are open to it, I'd love to collab again sometime.
I would love to.
Thank you for this, guys. I gotta go now. So
it's been nice chatting with you. Hope everything's okay. Speak to you soon.
Yeah, speak to you soon, guys. Have a great debate.